I'm Suntosh Pillay. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working in the public hospital system now for 10 years. So I consider myself a kind of young emerging scholar in the field. I think when I became a psychologist, my intentions were really about understanding people a bit better, and understanding humanity with more depth. That was really my intention around studying psychology. And so I've kind of committed myself to working in the public health system, so that's where I find myself. My daily space is walking into King Dinizulu Hospital Complex, formerly named after King George V, so even that space is an interesting space where different kind of histories meet. On a road named after the Dr. R.D. Naidu, which was previously called Stanley Copley, in a very interesting space in Durban, in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, a very unique geographical spot that strangely intersects all four of your previously kind of racially categorized suburbs. So the unique positioning of the hospital as a kind of lookout spot for the military and a previous psychiatric hospital and TB hospital. So I find myself on a day-to-day basis coordinating district hospital services. So essentially it's a hospital that people can walk into and get seen by a psychologist, and unfortunately they're stuck with me. So that's my day-to-day. I'm also linked to the University of KwaZulu-Natal through the Department of Psychiatry at the Nelson R. Mandela School of Medicine as an honorary clinical fellow. And in my spare time, I'm desperately trying to think through a PhD. But I won't even talk about that because my thinking about that is evolving and changing all the time to the point that I think is actually taking much too long to actually get done. So that's who I am. My thinking is very influenced by some critical text that I read throughout my own studies. So the one that comes to mind is the critical psychology textbook edited by Derek Cook. There was quite a pivotal text in my own learning. And strangely, I read it after I'd done my undergrad, and I was just offered to do a short lecturing gig. And that happened to be the course that I landed with. Interestingly, and perhaps synchronistically, a course that was traditionally taught by Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize. And it just so happened that he'd got promoted to the dean, and a slot was available to lecture, and I was given this textbook to lecture from. And I looked at this textbook and I thought, I'd never done this module as an undergrad student, so it might be a challenge. And then I started reading it to get a sense of what this course is about, and I thought, why on earth did I not do this course? Because as I started to understand some of the Fanonian concepts, the Marxist concepts, some of the Biko's concepts, and some of the history around psychology in that specific textbook, it actually gave me a language for some of the things I've been thinking about, but actually didn't have a vocabulary for. So I would actually locate that text, that specific textbook, as quite pivotal in my own thinking, in terms of giving me a psychological vocab to start expressing some of the things that I'd always thought about. And so my work then in a public hospital sector has forced me to think about poverty in a different kind of way. Because I think often as theorists or as the intelligentsia, we think about poverty in a very materialist way. But every day I have someone sitting and crying in front of me, every single day of my life. Someone who's either decided to try and kill themselves, someone who's been beaten up by their husband, someone who has been confronted with the emotionality of poverty in a way that I think you don't often see when you're studying poverty from the outside. And so part of my work as a clinical psychologist in a public hospital space has been really thinking about the intersections of poverty, mental health, social justice, decoloniality, to use the language that's kind of trending now. And then perhaps in a grander scheme, the role of psychology in society. So for me, that is like my fundamental orienting question. What is the role of psychology in society? Because I find it wholly inadequate that society only gets to me when they are beaten, broken, and literally on the brink of death. And so for me, taking the couch to the community or finding ways in which to engage in a critical community clinical psychology with a decolonial lens is like the things that keep me up at night. For me, part of the process is just asking the right questions. So part of my frustration, I suppose, with what I think is a colonial way of doing psychology is that we've zombified psychology in a way, where people are not even asking the right kind of questions to make it a kind of like living, breathing psychology that actually matters to people. So I feel disabled by fancy Fanonian and Marxist formulations in the end. So while that kind of language excites me at a theoretical point of view, when I have the lady sitting in front of me who is now homeless, has been beaten, and wants to commit suicide, I don't know what to do as a psychologist. I can't implement cognitive behavior therapy. It will be absurd to psychoanalyze the sources of her pain. And even your postmodernist frameworks just feel wholly inadequate. So for me, there's a missing link somewhere around what we are supposed to do as psychology professionals and what's actually needed of us in society. So for me, part of a kind of relevant decolonial / African psychology is really about answering those fundamental questions about how do we help people in a meaningful way.